She was fired, pregnant, and blindsided, right when Jasmine Pineda should have been decorating a nursery. She was packing her bags, and not by choice. TLC didn't make an announcement. No press release, no explanation in the reunion episode. They just yanked her from the Fiancé screen quietly while the audience was still reacting to scenes from the last aired episode where Jasmine was literally glowing through her pregnancy exhaustion. This wasn't a mutual decision. Jasmine didn't walk away. She was canceled off camera, off contract, and allegedly off all communication channels with production. Welcome to TLC Drama Files. I'm Oliva, and if you thought Fiancé was chaotic on screen, you haven't seen half of what's happening behind the scenes. Subscribe if you're here for the receipts, the timelines, and the reality behind the reality TV. And tell me in the comments, do you think this was a private decision gone public or a corporate mess they tried to bury? The moment Jasmine reportedly confirmed she was pregnant, stability should have been the priority. But instead of TLC offering support or privacy, they allegedly did the opposite, cut her from the franchise entirely while fans had no idea what was going on. So viewers kept watching, kept speculating, and while everyone assumed she was off-screen, prepping baby bottles and doctor visits, the real story was spiraling out of view because right when that TLC check stopped, Jasmine was hit again. This time by the man she thought would be her forever partner, Gino. According to court filings, not only did Gino sue her for a staggering dollar comma, claiming financial tampering and damage to property, but he also allegedly started proceedings to evict her from the Michigan home. That's right, suing a pregnant partner while threatening to kick her out of what used to be their shared home. And remember, these two were still posting pictures on social media just weeks before this mess exploded with captions like "forever teammates." But off Instagram, Jasmine was reportedly living in a nonstop emotional crisis. She'd lost her job. She was losing her home, and she was carrying a child while carrying the weight of betrayal from the father. And this wasn't some slow motion unraveling. This was a collapse that looked from the outside like it had been in the works for much longer than anyone guessed. So now the questions were everywhere, but answers carefully erased. Did Jasmine break a clause in her TLC contract, or was the network trying to quietly remove what they saw as a lawsuit liability? With no direct statement from TLC, the silence only added fuel to every theory. Was there a behind-the-scenes breach, a backstage blow-up, or was this simply a strategic exit they forced her into, knowing no one would question it until it was too late? And wait until you hear what was written in that lawsuit, because it gets way darker than anyone saw coming. Because if Jasmine's pregnancy was supposed to be her protection, the legal approach from Gino didn't seem to reflect that. Fans began to speculate. Was this planned? Why strike now? Why launch legal action against a mother to be knowing how vulnerable and unstable the situation already was? But even more telling, why wasn't this major fracture mentioned in the show? Why were scenes cut and story lines dropped, leaving gaps you could drive a truck through? What looked like sudden chaos wasn't sudden at all, and what looked like a falling out might have been brewing under those Instagram Smiles long before Jasmine missed her. Period. What TLC left out is starting to feel intentional. And Gino's next move gives that theory even more weight. Because as the legal battle picked up speed, fans began to see clues that this wasn't about property or money or even contracts. The fight playing out in court looked like a full-blown character assassination. And Jasmine, she wasn't staying quiet anymore. The number wasn't random. It was pointed. Dollar comma. That's what Gino allegedly demanded from Jasmine in a lawsuit that blindsided her, sliced like a cold blade into every remaining layer of peace she had left. He claimed financial mismanagement. He claimed property damage. He claimed she owed him reimbursement for things Jasmine says they had once agreed to share. That was the bombshell dropped, not in a courtroom where cameras were rolling, but in legal documents quietly filed while she was still reeling from TLC's Vanishing Act. Jasmine hadn't even fully processed being publicly erased before Gino served her with paperwork that accused her of wrecking his finances and with them her credibility. And calling it bad timing would be the understatement of the year. She was pregnant, unemployed, and emotionally raw, physically exhausted, and now legally cornered. No cast member had ever filed this kind of lawsuit mid-relationship, especially not while a baby was on the way. It opened a whole different level of moral debate. Legally, yes, anyone can file a claim. But ethically, how do you justify dragging a pregnant partner to court while also trying to make her homeless? Because the next part hit harder and faster, the eviction threats. Gino allegedly told Jasmine she had to leave, that he was the sole owner of their Michigan home, that she needed to find somewhere else to stay. And it wasn't his problem where there's no footage of this moment, no dramatic violin soundtrack from TLC, just panic in real life. One friend close to Jasmine allegedly said she thought Jasmine was having a panic attack when she got the notice, not from the pregnancy, but from the legal ambush that arrived in her mailbox. Suddenly, everything was a countdown, a due date and a deadline, running neck and neck. Her entire environment became unstable. How do you plan crib placement when you don't know which zip code you'll be living in? How do you sleep when the baby inside you is kicking and you're afraid that any knock on the door might be the next lawyer? Because what fans uncovered about Gino's past behavior flipped the internet upside down, and it hasn't stopped since. Receipts started spilling from unexpected sources, archival interviews, Reddit receipts, Instagram comments that didn't age well. Posts began resurfacing, alleging that Gino had previously been overly controlling financially. People who had dismissed earlier red flags were now combing through everything with a magnifying glass, wondering if Jasmine's so-called drama on the show wasn't random outbursts, but survival instincts. Meanwhile, Jasmine was allegedly cycling between anger and fear. She didn't just fear losing money or a house. She feared that no one would believe her, that her story would vanish behind the TMZ headline, that she'd be remembered as the one who always cried, not the one who was right. This wasn't two celebrities having a tacky breakup. This was a pregnant woman being cornered by the legal system. And the more people read the court filings, the more the tone online changed. This wasn't random conflict anymore. It was starting to look like targeted punishment. Still all technically legal, just morally sickening. A few legal experts chimed in online, confirming the paperwork was procedurally sound, even if it was cruel. But not a single statement from Gino's side seemed to show concern for Jasmine's pregnancy. Not one mention of erring on the side of humanity. It wasn't just cold. It was clinical, which made the silence from TLC sting even more. Was this why they cut her? Were they trying to shield the show from the blowback they saw coming? Or were they distancing themselves from a woman who was never supposed to speak up in the first place? Either way, Jasmine had been left to fight on multiple fronts, alone. But the internet, the fans, they were about to become the loudest defense. Team Gino never expected. The internet didn't do what TLC did. It paid attention. The moment fans realized Jasmine had quietly vanished from the show at the exact time she was pregnant and facing a lawsuit from Gino, social media lit up like dry brush catching fire. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and fan blogs erupted into chaos, confusion, and full-on protest. This wasn't casual commentary. It was outrage. People stopped joking about her crying on camera and started asking serious, uncomfortable questions. Why was she gone? Who decided she didn't deserve a send-off? And why was Gino filing legal action right when she seemed most vulnerable? Nobody was buying the silence. Platforms that usually competed for views started echoing the same frustration. Where was the accountability? TLC had aired her love story for seasons, followed every tear, every kiss, every breakdown, and then dumped her without expecting anyone to notice. But fans noticed. Fast clip compilations started circulating everywhere, comparing Jasmine's disappearance from the show to the sudden flood of legal chaos in her real life. Viewers revisited old scenes with new eyes. That moment she looked emotionally drained during the Michigan dinner. That wasn't a mood swing. It was burnout. The explosive arguments everyone called scripted. Now people were thinking maybe they weren't exaggerated for cameras after all. And then the louder voices joined in. Large accounts, day bloggers, influencers with millions of views calling out the timing, the gut punch cruelty of it all. Gino dropping a massive lawsuit while TLC allegedly wiped her from the narrative felt calculated to some not coincidental. Suddenly, Jasmine wasn't just a TV character with sharp emotions. She was a pregnant, abandoned woman facing eviction and public erasure. At the same time, the conversation shifted. The same audience that once labeled her too dramatic now posted messages saying they felt misled, betrayed. That Jasmine hadn't been a villain. She'd been in survival mode. And while she was scrambling to prepare for motherhood, the man she loved had allegedly been compiling evidence to take her down. And once you hear what Jasmine documented in her private journal, you'll see why everything changed so fast. Because while the public chaos unfolded online, Jasmine was keeping quiet but controlled. She wasn't commenting, wasn't subtweeting, and definitely wasn't engaging in a digital meltdown. But behind the silence, she was allegedly building her own defense. Sources close to her claimed she began recording everything months ago. Not for TV, not for sympathy points, but for herself. A private journal, screenshots, records of money lent and never returned, notes on arguments that ended too easily, alleged emotional manipulation, silent treatment, patterns, and times where she felt like she was being set up for something, but couldn't prove it. Until now, by the time Gino escalated with legal filings, Jasmine wasn't scrambling. She was stacking, creating a timeline, preparing her own set of facts, ones that didn't need airtime or a reunion couch to be valid and public sympathy. It kept rising. The Jasmine people were now seeing wasn't crying over an iPad anymore. She was preparing to stand in court, holding her stomach in one hand and a stack of documented receipts in the other. Meanwhile, Gino's entire image was collapsing under the weight of scrutiny and TLC's silence. It turned into a spotlight. People didn't just see what they showed anymore. They were starting to see everything they didn't. But Jasmine wasn't focused on damage, control, or likes. She was focused on something bigger now, because in just weeks she'd not only have to find a safe place to give birth, but walk into a court ready to face a man who'd once promised to build a life with her. And this next chapter would be anything but quiet. Every ping mattered. Every transfer alert made her shoulders tense. After weeks of silence, Jasmine moved like someone who knew waiting was risky. On advice, allegedly, she began capturing everything: texts, bank transfers, screenshots of payment requests, timestamps on delivery receipts, even voice notes saved from arguments that ended too fast to make sense. If it touched money or control, it went in a folder. If it touched safety, it went in a second one. Then came the private journal, not a pretty scrapbook, a log. Dates, moods, what triggered the spiral. Notes on when a promise got pulled back, when a shared cost turned into a personal bill, when a raised voice switched to a quiet thread about who owned what. In my opinion, this was not about drama. It read like a map of pressure points across a relationship, turning legal. Those pages allegedly went to attorneys not for clout, for protection. Fans picked up on the silence and reassigned meaning to it. She was not disappearing. She was building. The same woman who was once accused of being impulsive was now operating like a surgical team. No leaks, no rants, just a growing archive. The internet went from side eyes to slow nods. She looked hurt, yes, but she also looked precise. Nights got heavier. Friends say she barely slept, jolting, awake with a tight chest and shaky hands. She would monitor her breathing, then check the door, then check her email. Prenatal stress does not pause. For paperwork, appointments had to be kept, meals had to be eaten, and she still had to prepare for a child while tracking legal deadlines that did not care if she rested or not. Viewers who remembered the laughing, glam Jasmine from early seasons were shocked. That woman held the frame in every scene. This one was holding on. She didn't stay down. There were small wins. She set up a clean bank log. She labeled every receipt. She built a timeline that matched her memories with transaction history. She asked questions before she agreed to anything. She told friends no when they pushed for tea. In my view, that was discipline. She looked like someone who had learned the cost of speaking too soon and was choosing accuracy over noise. Because we now know the baby wasn't the only one she was trying to protect. The more the record grew, the clearer the pattern looked too. People following along. She was not only defending her name, she was building a firewall around her immediate future, housing, medical care, the right to be seen as credible in front of a judge. If the filings painted her as reckless, these logs answered with dates and numbers, not feelings, facts. A few clips from the show started to read differently. That Michigan dinner where she looked spaced out. The shopping trip where a joke about spending landed flat. The scene where she demanded reassurance and got a blank stare. Alone, they were. Messy TV, lined up next to a paper trail. They looked like early tremors. Before the break, fans said the edit had trained them to see her as chaotic. Now, they were seeing the pressure that made her look that way. Through it all, Jasmine kept her social pages careful. A single caption about staying strong, a repost of a prenatal checklist, a blurred shot of her hands resting on her stomach. No direct call-outs, no names. Still, people read between the lines. You could feel the fight without a single tagged account. Then she posted from an ultrasound visit, a simple moment quiet with a light smile that did not match the weight of the week. The comments flooded with love, but a few viewers paused on one detail in the frame and asked a sharper question. Not about Gino, not about TLC, about the next move. What they thought they saw raised new stakes for everything that came after. And if they were right, the court strategy would have to shift again. Fast. Pregnancy under legal fire felt like living with a clock in both hands. One counted down to a due date. The other ticked toward court filings that refused to slow down. Clinic waiting. Rooms were quiet, but her head was not. She filled out intake forms while thinking about affidavit. She tracked vitamins and deadlines. Every appointment demanded calm breathing, steady blood pressure, and small talk about crib colors. Every alert on her phone dragged her back to numbers, claims, and dates stamped in black ink. She was not posting about it. She was moving through it one step at a time in silence that had weight. Medical visits turned into stress drills. Nurses asked about sleep. She smiled and said, working on it. In my opinion, that was not a lie, but it was not the full truth either. Psychologists, in general terms, describe how high stress during pregnancy raises anxiety, disrupts sleep, and strains the body. That does not diagnose anyone. It frames the pressure. She did her best to limit conflict before appointments. Less screen time, more water, a walk to clear her head, then the car ride to the clinic with her phone face down. So, another legal notice did not spike her heart rate before the blood pressure cuff went on. The contrast felt ugly. The same network that aired every tense moment had gone silent. The same world that replayed her fights for views now watched her face eviction threats in real time. She was a pregnant woman working through housing questions while a lawsuit chased her. That is not content. That is survival. Groceries became missions. Keep the list tight. Watch every dollar. Avoid eye contact in Aisles because strangers whispered about. Scenes they thought were staged. Even a pharmacy run felt heavy. Prenatal. Vitamins in one hand, phone in the other, waiting for the next ping from a lawyer. She adapted. She scheduled calls. Around OB visits, she kept a folder, ready in her bag with medical notes, legal notes, and a short list of questions for both teams. She practiced breathing before sleep. She streamed a prenatal class. She told friends to stop, sending her TikTok edits and start sending checklists. She kept receipts. She stayed off messy threads. She answered what she had to answer and ignored bait. In my view, that is what strategy looks like when life gets cruel. Quiet steps that add up to stability, because what came out during the filings forced even TLC execs to panic behind the scenes. Baby health entered the legal story. Her attorneys, according to people familiar with standard practice, asked for reasonable scheduling and for consideration of her condition. That is not special treatment. That is basic safety. Stress affects sleep. Sleep affects judgment. Judgment affects every decision tied to money and home. The filings did not pause. They kept landing. So she kept building her record, dates, transfers, screenshots, a simple ledger that matched her memory to numbers that do not lie. Her ultrasound post looked soft. At a glance, a calm photo, a small smile. But the comments showed how tuned in the audience had become. People noted details in the frame and started theories, not wild gossip, careful questions about who stood by her that day, whether she had support beyond friends, whether a new ally had stepped in off camera. No one proved anything. The point was not the rumor. The point was the mood. She did not look alone. Sympathy rose, but pity did not help her pay bills or file motions. She was still taking action. She looked for stable housing. She kept every medical record within reach. She told her team where she would be and when. She moved through each day with a short script for herself. Eat, hydrate, rest, confirm. Appointments, log expenses. Do not take calls that twist your stomach. Protect the baby. Protect the record. Protect the next move. Meanwhile, the public kept asking why a franchise built on love stories went quiet when one of those stories turned into legal warfare. During pregnancy, fans who laughed at edits in the past now studied old scenes for warning signs. Some reached out to crisis resources on her behalf. Others pushed production for clarity. None of that changed the fact that Jasmine had to show up for doctor visits on time, while also showing up for legal deadlines that did not care if the nursery paint was dry. The pressure did something else. It stripped away the noise. This was not about plot lines. This was about a mother in formation who refused to fold. She was not promised a happy ending. She was promised due process, and she planned to meet it. Even if that meant walking into a courtroom with swollen feet and a stack of receipts thicker than any script. And the court dates, they were only the beginning. Fans started asking a hard question. Was Jasmine cut because she stood up to production? The timing felt off to people who had watched her write out blow-ups on camera for seasons. Why would the franchise suddenly go quiet when the story reached its most human point? The theories came fast. Maybe she refused a pickup shoot that would reframe the lawsuit for ratings. Maybe she asked for safe scheduling during pregnancy and the request clashed with call times. Maybe she pushed back on a storyline that made her look reckless while legal paperwork said something different. None of this is confirmed. It reflects what viewers pieced together once they saw the gap between what aired and what played out. In real life, contracts became part of the conversation without making hard claims. There are standard clauses that networks lean on when they want control, NDAs that block cast from sharing, behind-the-scenes details, exclusivity, terms that limit off-platform, monetization like paid interviews or premium content, morality clauses that give the network broad power if a cast member gets negative press, even appearance fee structures that hinge on filming compliance. If production believed Jasmine had stepped outside any of those lines, they could use that to justify a quiet exit. If she felt pressured to keep filming through a pregnancy crisis, she could have asked to pause and collided with the machine. Both stories fit the facts people saw. From the outside, there is a cleaner explanation, too. The network might have cut her to avoid legal exposure while the relationship turned into a courtroom battle. Pregnancy raises liability. Open litigation can complicate release forms. A company that thrives on dramatic edits might prefer silence over risk once lawyers get involved. That does not mean anyone cared less. It means their priority shifted to the brand. Viewers do not have to like that. They get to judge it. Then came the courtroom. Reports from attendees painted a simple picture. Jasmine arrived looking drained, one hand resting low, the other gripping paperwork. No glam squad, no performative tears, a face that showed what months of stress due to a person. Gino, according to those present, stayed behind his attorneys and stuck to the filings. It looked methodical. It looked like a full push to win on paper, while public opinion moved in the other direction. And you won't believe which cast members are now backing her in court without saying a word. The quiet support mattered. Some ex-cast showed up and did not post. Others sat in the gallery and left before anyone could turn it into a selfie moment. That kind of presence carries weight without feeding a circus. It told viewers a simple thing. People who know the system also know when a line has been crossed. In my opinion, that is why the audience shifted from curiosity to conviction. They were no longer watching a messy breakup. They were watching a woman insist on due process during the hardest months of her life. Speculation about contract violations kept swirling. Fans asked if a side brand deal set off alarms, if a leak to a blogger broke an NDA, if subscription content crossed an exclusivity rule. None of those questions prove wrongdoing. They explain how a company could decide to freeze a cast member while keeping viewers in the dark. The contrast felt harsh. The show had no problem airing a meltdown. It had a problem acknowledging a meltdown that now involved court time and pregnancy stress. The edit stopped the legal